Show that the equation x cubed plus 7x minus 5 equals 0 has a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1. So the first thing we're going to want to do is substitute these two values of x into this equation here. So if we start off with when x equals 0, x cubed plus 7x minus 5 will be equal to 0 cubed plus 7 multiplied by 0 minus 5, which gives us an answer of negative 5. And then when x equals 1, x cubed plus 7x minus 5 is equal to 1 cubed plus 7 multiplied by 1 minus 5, which gives us 3. Now a solution to this equation is a value which we can substitute in for x to make this equation equal to 0. So if we draw a zoomed in version of this graph, where x equals 1 is here, the graph would look something like this going through 1. And the solution for this equation would be here. And we can see this value is between 0 and 1. So therefore, because one of these values is negative and one of these values is positive, then this solution has an equation between x equals 0 and x equals 1. So the final thing we can do is write a summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of, therefore, the equation x cubed plus 7x minus 5 has a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1 because one of the values is negative and one of the values is positive. And this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get 1 mark for substituting the values of x into the equation, and the second mark for showing that the equation has a solution between x equals 0 and x equals 1 with the correct evidence. Show that the equation x cubed plus 7x minus 5 equals 0 can be arranged to give x equals 5 over x squared plus 7. So the first thing we can do for this question is we can factorise out an x term from these first 2 terms here. And this will give us x multiplied by x squared plus 7 minus 5. So now the next thing we can do is add 5 to both sides of this equation. And this gives us x multiplied by x squared plus 7 equals 5. So now the final thing we need to do is divide both sides of the equation by x squared plus 7. And this gives us that x is equal to 5 over x squared plus 7. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for factorising out the original equation and our second mark for the complete correct solution.
Starting with x0 equals 1, use the iteration formula xn plus 1 equals 5 divided by xn squared plus 7, 3 times to find an estimate for the solution of x cubed plus 7x minus 5 equals 0. So essentially for this question, we're going to want to work out what the value of x3 will be. So we can use this equation by starting off with x0 and repeating this 3 times until we get the answer for x3. So x1 is equal to 5 divided by x0 squared plus 7. So we can substitute in the value x0 equals 1 into this equation. And this tells us that x1 is equal to 5 divided by 1 squared plus 7. And this gives us an answer of 0.625. So we can use the same process to find the value of x2. So x2 will be equal to 5 divided by x1 squared plus 7. And we can either use our answer button on our calculator to substitute in the value for x1, or we can type in 0.625. Either way will work. So this tells us that x2 is equal to 5 divided by 0.625 squared plus 7, which gives us an answer of 0.67653277. And again we can use the same process to find the value of x3 and therefore find our answer. So x3 will be equal to 5 divided by x2 squared plus 7. And again we can replace this number with the answer key on our calculator, or we can write out the number in full into our calculator. However, it's important that we don't round this number too early on in the question, as this will reduce the accuracy of our answer. So if we put this into our calculator, this gives us a value of x3 as 0.670448. And we don't need to round this value any further. Now this question's worth 3 marks. We'll get our first mark for substituting 1 into the formula to give us the value of x1. We'll get our second mark for substituting in the value of x1 and the value of x2 into the formula to give us the values of x2 and x3. And we'll get our final mark for the correct answer to at least 4 decimal places. By substituting your answer to part C into x cubed plus 7x minus 5, comment on the accuracy of your estimate for the solution to x cubed plus 7x minus 5 equals 0. So what we want to do is we want to substitute our answer from part C into this equation, and if we get a value that's near to 0, we can say that our estimate is fairly accurate. So if we substitute our answer from part C into x cubed plus 7x minus 5, this will give us 0.670448 cubed plus 7 multiplied by 0.670448 minus 5, and this gives us an answer of negative 0.0054948. So as we can see, negative 0.0054948 is fairly close to 0. So we can say that our estimate is pretty accurate. So now the final thing we need to do is write down our reasoning. So we can write something along the lines of the estimate is accurate because the substitution gives us a value which is close to 0. Now this question's worth 2 marks. We'll get our first mark for substituting in our answer from part C into the given equation, and we'll get our second mark for explaining why the estimate is accurate.